Hello and welcome. I'm Ali Mustafa and this is Straight Talk. Turbulent times for Turkey after its currency, the Lira, hit a record low against the dollar this month. It has recovered a bit since, but the plunge, due in part to worsening US-Turkey ties, may have long-term effects. The Lira's rapid fall was linked to the latest row with the United States over detained pastor Andrew Brunson, which has resulted in sanctions against two Turkish ministers, as well as doubling of US tariffs on Turkish steel and aluminium. The evangelist pastor faces terrorism charges linked to the failed 2016 coup. Washington wants Ankara to release him immediately, but Turkey says it will proceed against Brunson according to its own law. And it has also hit back by imposing sanctions on US officials, as well as raising tariffs on some US products. And joining me now to discuss this further in the studio is Dogan Yilmaz. He's the Director for Business Development at Vintage Bullion DMCC. Hakki Ocal is the Assistant Professor at Ibn Haldun University and a regular on the show as well. And from Washington, D.C., we're joined by Beasey, who is President and CEO at the American-Turkish Council. Thank you for joining us, Howard. Let's begin with you, Dogan. We've seen a lot of volatility as far as the Lira is concerned, even going into this weekend and next week, a lot of uncertainty is expected to prevail. What is actually happening with the currency?
Actually, that's $1 million question. A lot of people asking the same question, and we've been discussing
Not a million lira question, but $1 million question.
Actually, there was a fire in the economy, in Turkish economy. The reason is, large current account deficit, and that's a result. Actually, it's not a cause. This low saving rate and the capital formation in Turkey causing this, and Turkey has been reliant on the foreign capital for a long time, and since 2010. It has been enjoying, cheap foreign currency funding. But what's going on in the current climate? U.S. interest rates are rising, and developed countries as well. We are going to be seeing the same thing in the ECB soon, probably, and that makes the FX inflows and the liquidity short, as well as expensive for the especially emerging countries like Turkey. And so what we are seeing is devaluation. But you would expect this devaluation to be a more orderly fashion. And unfortunately, strained relations with the US.
You mentioned that, so let's give a bit of context for our viewers. You talk about an organized devaluation or an imposed devaluation. In 2014, the Lira was a little over $2. But since then, partly owing, as you were mentioning, to a series of events including terror attacks, the failed July 2016 coup, and now relations with the United States as they are, the currency has taken a hit. Hakki, I want to turn it to you. What is the thinking, the rationale in Ankara right now?
Ankara is, to say the least, is perplexed. They were never ever expecting the ally, the strategic ally in Washington would willingly, I mean purposefully and intentionally trying to devaluate Turkish lira and sabotage the economy.
It's not that relations have been perfect between Turkey and the United States in the past year, 2 years, especially with the YPG in Syria. There are a lot of outstanding issues between the two, but this level of acrimony?
Regarding YPG, I mean, one outgoing Secretary of State and the new Secretary of State got together twice with our minister, and they have what they call road plan and on Manbij and the rest of Syria. Everything was going on its way, and all of a sudden, remember there are elections in November 6 in the United States, and the Trump-Pence ticket is getting its strongest support from the religious groups. And here you have somebody presented as a captive priest or pastor, and you demand it with all your mighty force of the United States, and this tiny little country, it is not, they are not going to give these men to you. So you can show your force. You show everything. Because you have to prove yourself that you are a good Christian ticket to win the election. So you need support for.
So you think this has to do with domestic US politics? That's the perception in Ankara. Well, let's actually go to Washington, D.C. and the US, where we're joined by Howard Beasey. He's been involved with the Turkish-American community for quite some time. Howard, Turkey and the US have been NATO allies since the 1950s, where Ankara stood by Washington against the Soviet threat. But now Trump comes out and says that Turkey has been taking advantage of the U.S. for a long time. Has Turkey been taking advantage of the U.S.?
Well, as you point out, Turkey and the United States have been longtime allies, almost 70 years now of great cooperation, and that's really the foundation of our relationship has been mutual respect, cooperation, particularly in the strategic space. I agree with the two previous comments that much of this is about domestic in this country, and sort of a confluence in the case of Pastor Brunson, as it works its way through the Turkish courts, has been a catalyst here in Washington for a number of other grievances that some of which have been mentioned are challenging relationship over the YPG and others over the past few years. And so this has served as a catalyst to really get together multiple factions that are displeased with the current relationship and tone of the relationship.
Well, as you point out, Howard, I want to bring it in. I want to bring in this graphic for the benefit of our viewers on outstanding issues between Turkey and the United States. You mentioned the PKK, Fethullah Gulen, the suspected terror mastermind behind the July 2016 coup, lives in the United States. Turkey has been calling for his extradition, which the U.S. has denied on account of a lack of evidence. The PKK in Syria, the Halkbank case, which was quite a turning point between the two as well. Then you have the purchase of S-400 Russian missile systems. The F-35 deal, of which Turkey was a part of, is on hold essentially. So all these issues piling on, reaching some sort of zenith with this point. Is it a point of no return in your opinion, Howard?
I don't think we're at a point of no return. It's troubling that we're at loggerheads over this current issue, because this really should be one of the easiest to solve, this case of the detained Pastor Brunson. So it doesn't bode well that we've got all these other things in line behind us. But let's be clear, this is about domestic politics here in the U.S. We do not, as the American-Turkish Council representing business communities both here in the United States and in Turkey, we don't agree with the use of sanctions, economic sanctions, as it were, for political measures. We'd like to see the two sides get back to the negotiation table on this. And I think in some senses, if you look closely at some of the comments out of Ankara, there is still a door open there. And we're trying to encourage both sides to get back to the table on this.
Well, you guys agree that it's on politics. I'll bring it back to Hakki and bring it back to Turkey. Erdogan has come out and said that he feels betrayed. In fact, he said that you are a strategic partner, talking about the U.S., in NATO, and on the other hand, you stab your ally in the back. Is this acceptable? Is it acceptable?
It is not. I mean, no sane politician in Turkey would accept such a language in front. I mean, you can say such things, whatever you want to, behind the closed doors, but when you are strategically alive with a country, you can say such things, taking advantage of United States. He is putting Turkey in a very bad light right now, and we are not, as David mentioned, in the point of no return, but Trump is pushing us real fast to that point. He should be careful. I mean, yes, today's, he has daily tweets, you know, in his pajamas. In his latest, he said, cut off Turkey. This is a very round word. I mean, you cut off the extra branches of a tree or something. He didn't say cutting out Turkey or something. He's playing with words. I mean, this is not sounding good to Turkish ears.
The U.S. president might be playing with words. I want to take it back to Howard in D.C. Howard, recently we saw a Turkish delegation go to the United States to meet officials in D.C. and return with little or nothing to show for it. There were also reports, rumors, in fact, that there was a deal or almost a deal to get Pastor Brunson, returned back to the United States, which didn't materialize. What needs to happen to normalize U.S.-Turkey relations moving forward?
You're correct. There has been a number of channels of communication, so we think that's encouraging, of course. But I think you're right in that your assessment of both sides came together. And let's be clear, both sides feel like they have legitimate grievance right now. And the past few years, we've experienced a tremendous amount of trust deficit between the two sides over things like YPG, the failed coup attempt, these kinds of things. And both sides, both governments need to own some of the responsibility for that, I think. It's our opinion that the only way this is going to get solved is through concerted dialogue. And to be frank, I think that these two very strong leaders need to come back together on this and figure out how we chart a better path forward. Because it's unconscionable to think that the United States and Turkey are not going to continue to be strong allies in the future. There's too much at stake, and any casual observer of this relationship knows that there is much more that pushes us together than pulls us apart.
On that note, thank you for joining us, Howard Beasey from Washington. We will continue our discussion and we'll talk about the way forward. But interestingly, these past couple of weeks have also given clarity to both American and Turkish positions and shown them who stands where and who stands with whom. In fact, Turkey now might be in a position to search for new allies.